Are you ready to hear an intriguing tale? One that blends old folk legends with a touch of history. Today, I'll be guiding you through the story of the Excavation of Barrow, an adventure game set in the mysterious north of England during the late 1800s. Prepare yourself for a journey into the unusual, with a twist you won't see coming. Before we dive in, don't forget to like and subscribe for more ASMR gaming content. You can also support me on Ko-fi. There's a link to my page in the description below. And now, let's get started. It's the late 1800s in the heart of Victorian England. The air is thick with the essence of a time steeped in tradition and mystery. We follow Miss Thomasina Bateman, a determined antiquarian, as she journeys by train from London to a remote village called Bewley, nestled in the northeast of England. This is the land of the moors, a vast untamed stretch of hills covered in shrubs, where the winds carry stories of old. Just days ago, Thomasina received an intriguing letter from Mr. Leonard Shoulder, inviting her to assist in an excavation. You see, Thomasina is an expert in barrows, ancient burial mounds, and she's always on the lookout for exciting new sites to explore. This particular barrow, Barrow, lies just outside Bewley and is steeped in local legends. Whispers of secrets buried deep within have stirred her curiosity. It's the kind of invitation she could never refuse, for this is not merely her job, but a vocation passed down by her father, William, who once shared the same passion for unearthing the past. As Miss Bateman steps off the train at the small, rain-soaked Bewley station, she notices no one is there, not even the station master. Only the steady drizzle of rain fills the silence, a common occurrence in this part of the world. Suddenly, from the misty gloom, an old woman appears out of nowhere. Though her manner is somewhat brusque, she's kind enough to direct Thomasina toward the Plough and Furrow Inn, where she's to meet Mr. Shoulder. But before she leaves, the woman gives an ominous warning. There's not much for you here in Bewley, love. Best take the next train back to the city while you can. Thomasina, undeterred, knows that villages in isolated places like this often harbor a distrust for strangers, especially those who come seeking the unknown. After a short damp walk, Thomasina arrives in the village. It feels desolate, as if time itself has forgotten this place. The buildings are weathered and worn, their windows dark and shuttered, and the few shops seem long abandoned. In the village square stands the Plough and Furrow Inn, its warmth and light a welcome contrast to the dreariness outside. As she approaches the entrance, a drunken man stumbles toward her, his breath heavy with ale. Thomasina deftly sidesteps his advances with a firm yet polite reminder that perhaps his wife is waiting for him at home. Inside, the inn is cozy, with a small gathering of patrons basking in the glow of the fireplace, enjoying hearty food and drinks. Thomasina approaches the innkeeper and secures a room for herself and her assistant, Kenneth, who is due to arrive the following day. After settling in, she freshens up and prepares to meet Mr. Shoulder, the man who brought her here. With Mr. Shoulder yet to arrive, Thomasina strikes up a conversation with Stanley Kemp, the innkeeper. Stanley is a kind man with stories of his own. He's been running the inn for the past 16 years, after saving enough from his years working all over the country. They chat about Bewley, and Stanley confirms he knows Mr. Shoulder. However, it seems Mr. Shoulder is not here yet, leaving Thomasina with more time to fill. Fortunately, Stanley is good company. As they talk, Thomasina explains her work, her excavation of ancient barrows across England, all for an upcoming book she's writing, Vestiges of Antiquity in Rural England. Her passion for uncovering history runs deep, passed down from her father, William, who was also a barrow digger. Sadly, he now lies in a coma, bedridden after a terrible horse accident that happened about 25 years ago. Stanley listens intently, clearly fascinated by her story, until she mentions Obbs Barrow. At this, his expression changes, his face becoming blank. He tells her he's never heard of such a place, despite the fact that, according to Mr. Shoulder's letter, the barrow is known in local legends. Something feels off. What could this mean? After her pleasant conversation with Stanley, Thomasina realizes that Mr. Shoulder still hasn't appeared. With time to spare, she decides to mingle with the patrons of the inn. However, not all of them share Stanley's friendliness. Take Cyril, for example, a grumpy old man who sits in the corner brooding. He grumbles about the railway, muttering that it will only bring trouble to Bewley, now that outsiders can reach the village. Of course, Thomasina knows better. She's likely the first visitor Bewley has seen in months, if not longer. It's hard to imagine anyone traveling to this remote village to cause trouble. After all, Bewley is home to little more than a church and a handful of houses, and the ever-present moors stretching out endlessly beyond the horizon. Thomasina knows it's best not to engage with Cyril's pessimistic ramblings, so she quietly leaves him to his bluster. Besides, she expects Mr. Shoulder to arrive any moment now. But, as the hours slip by, no sign of Mr. Shoulder. Just as Thomasina prepares to retire for the night, the man she met earlier, the intoxicated fellow, reappears. Though initially displeased to see him again, she's taken aback when he approaches to apologize for his earlier behavior. His name is Arthur Tillet, and to Thomasina's surprise, he claims to know Mr. Shoulder. Eager for information, she buys him an ale, hoping to learn more. Unfortunately, things don't go as planned. Arthur is still very much inebriated, struggling to keep his eyes open. He excuses himself to the lavatory, but after quite some time passes, he fails to return. Growing concerned, Thomasina decides to check on him, only to find the restrooms empty, save for a scruffy grey cat glaring at her from the corner. Puzzled, she notices a door leading to the back alley, but it's jammed, seemingly blocked from the outside. Determined to find out what's going on, she ventures around the building to reach the alley from another direction. As she approaches, she catches a glimpse of a figure disappearing into the shadows. A man, but not Arthur. Who could it be? When she reaches the blocked back door, she finds a piece of wood lodged against it, along with a single white glove lying on the ground. But of Arthur, no trace. Did he block the door and flee? If so, why? The whole situation feels unsettling, leaving Thomasina with more questions than answers. With no leads, Thomasina decides to chase the figure she spotted, heading toward the eastern outskirts of the village. But Bewley, now shrouded in darkness and drenched in rain, is not a place to wander aimlessly. The man she pursued is long gone, disappearing into the desolate moors. Realizing she's lost her way, she wisely heads back to the inn, just as Stanley calls for last orders. The day has been long, and tomorrow will be even busier. Thomasina must find Mr. Shoulder, and with her assistant Kenneth arriving by midday, she'll finally have the equipment and funds she needs to begin her work. Later that night, Thomasina falls into a deep, exhausted sleep. But it's not long before something pulls her from her slumber. The scruffy cat from earlier has somehow found its way into her room, now perched on her bed, staring at her with piercing eyes. It feels as if the cat is trying to read her thoughts, its gaze unwavering and intense. Thomasina closes her eyes just for a moment, and when she opens them again, the cat is gone. As quickly as she was awakened, sleep claims her once more. A few hours later, Thomasina stirs awake, her mind foggy with a lingering memory of the night before. Was it all just a dream? She checks the door to her room, still locked, just as she left it when she went to bed. It must have been a dream, she tells herself, though it felt so vivid, so real. Pushing aside the unsettling thought, she heads downstairs to join Stanley. They chat for a while, making arrangements for her assistant arrival and deciding where to store her bulky excavation equipment. The alley behind the inn seems to be a suitable spot. But Stanley has something else on his mind, a confession he needs to make. He apologizes to Thomasina for not being entirely truthful. It turns out he does know about Barrow. Most people in Bewley do. They all know it's a place best left undisturbed. There are dark rumors surrounding the Barrow, whispers that warn against meddling with what lies. Shoulder, he knows him all too well. Stanley advises her to steer clear of both the Barrow and the man. But Thomasina is not one to be swayed by old tales and superstitions. Legends, she believes, are just that, legends. She has no intention of abandoning her plan. First, however, she needs to find Mr. Shoulder and the location of Hobbs Barrow. Unfortunately, Stanley cannot help her with that. He genuinely doesn't know where the Barrow is or where Mr. Shoulder resides. For that, Thomasina will need to ask around the village, and so she sets off on her quest. To her relief, the rain from the previous day has cleared, leaving behind a crisp, fresh morning. The sky is bright, and the village looks much more alive. There are more people about, and the overall atmosphere feels less dreary than the day before. Thomasina begins asking around about Mr. Shoulder and the Barrow, but her inquiries are met with vague answers and guarded looks. No one seems to know exactly where Mr. Shoulder lives, and any mention of Hobbs Barrow is greeted with strange, almost fearful glances. One after another, the villagers caution her not to meddle with it. Still, the people are friendly enough. The blacksmith, for example, who has lived in Bewley his entire life, enjoys collecting fossils. Or Mrs. de Plancy, who is selling delicious Bakewell puddings to raise funds for St. Edmund's Church. By all accounts, those puddings are the best around, and everyone in the village seems to love them. It's a shame Thomasina doesn't have enough money to buy one just yet, but with her assistant due to arrive soon, she'll have more funds at her disposal. In the next episode, Thomasina's search for Mr. Shoulder continues, but he remains elusive. Perhaps it's time to shift focus and try to find Hobbs Barrow on her own. However, the locals aren't exactly eager to help. They seem determined to keep her from meddling in the Barrow's secrets. Yet, just when all hope seems lost, unexpected help arrives from a surprising source.